Okay. Let's do this thing. So get this. I got a message from some jackass named CWA92, and he says, unsubbed for this garbage. Well, fuck off. Nobody fucking needs you. Good God. Unbelievable. I mean, I can't believe. I mean, I don't even understand what the deal is. I mean, is Gonzalo Lira like a hated person among some people? I mean, I'm sure he is. I'm sure this was not the most popular guy in the world, but he was popular to a lot of people. And I can't believe somebody would just be like, oh, if you're gonna do a live stream, remembering this guy, well, I'm just gonna unsubscribe. Like, fuck on off, then. I don't. Oh my God. Oh, wow. I mean, I know this isn't something that's comic book related. I know it's not. I don't think he had any intersection with the comic book world whatsoever. If you're looking for, comic book commentary tonight, you're probably not going to find much any. But I'm just like, really? You want to unsubscribe? I mean, this is like the one time I've live streamed about something other than comics. It just happens to be about this particular subject, a guy who died, you know? And I'm like, I want to have like a little, I don't know, rest in peace memoriam kind of show. And all of a sudden, I'm just going to unsubscribe. It's like, that's fine. I'm sure, feel free to unsubscribe from the entire human race. I'm sure they'll be fine without you. Good God, the people. Okay, so Gonzalo Lira. I first found out about him probably during the days of my shoulder rehab. See, I had a problem with my shoulder at one point. My shoulder was stiff, and I could not lift it above this much. And so I had to go into rehab. So I went to an orthodontic specialist, or orthodontic. Wait, that's teeth. Orthopedic specialist. I went to an orthopedic specialist, and I thought for sure that I was going to need surgery on my shoulder because when you can't lift your shoulder past a certain point, you're thinking, oh hell, there's something in the way, something screwed up in here, and I'm going to wind up needing surgery. I'm going to be out for a year. I'm going to go on disability. I'm going to do all this blah 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 blah. You would be surprised what physical rehab will accomplish. Physical, just going to rehab and going through the exercises and doing all that. I've had work done on both of my shoulders now, and I mean not work in the sense of I've had surgery, but Garfield's Bizarre Adventure says, "Sup, Mike? I would be lying if I said I didn't Google the person in the title of the video." Well, I mean, if you don't know the guy, I mean, you're probably not going to. Tonight's not the night you're going to learn a tremendous amount about him. I'm actually wondering more if there are people out there who are in my circle who did intersect with his circle in the sense that they watched his videos. I'm kind of curious about that. I don't know how many people out there who are, I mean, I've only got 774 subscribers, one less thanks to CWA92 who just, lost his shit. And so 773 subscribers, he had how many thousands? I think he had like 100,000 subscribers practically, at least. And how many of those intersected with mine, or with comic book readers in general? How many people, as far as comic book readers goes, intersected with this, quote unquote manosphere that was out here? Because, going back to my story, I wound up injuring my shoulder, and during the time that I was doing these rehab exercises, which completely fixed my shoulder, and like I said, I had both of my shoulders under rehab care at one point or another, and rehab just did the world for them. And I started listening to a lot of YouTube things because I had to have something to keep my brain active while I was doing my rehab exercises. And so that's when I started listening to a lot of these YouTubers. I discovered Scott Adams. I discovered Stefan Molyneux. I discovered Garfield's Bizarre Adventure says, don't you know, Mike, if you want big views these days, it's got to be about the drama surrounding indie comics. Well, I understand that. I mean, frankly, I'm thankful that Ethan Van Sciver appears to have put off his stuff for today, and not doing another trash cast, although that may stop that may wind out to be an untrue prediction by the end of the night. But I started listening to Scott Adams. I started listening to Stefan Molyneux. I started listening to Jordan Peterson. And one of the people who kept popping up in those, YouTube recommends was Coach Red Pill. And hello, that's a catchy name. And of course, everybody understands the red pill metaphor. That comes from the Matrix. You take the red pill, you get to wake up and see what reality is really like. You take the blue pill and you go back to sleep and you live out a comfortable illusion. So I started watching Coach Red Pill's content, and it was funny, and he had a good sense of humor, and he talked on all of these different things largely about dating and women and who to avoid dating. I think he most got famous for his video on never date a single mother, and of course, just from the title, you realize, oh crap, that is some of the most controversial. That's did you really mean to hit that hot button? And so, I'm looking at that oh my God, that's terrible. And of course you watch it and, all of a sudden it sounds like some of these reasons sound legit. Garfield's Bizarre Adventure, the Tate brothers have taken over the Red Pill Manosphere nowadays. Yeah, I've never listened to them. And, from what I've heard of them recently, it's I wouldn't want to steer anyone in their direction. But Coach Red Pill, he wasn't selling anything, at least for a while. He did have a Patreon page that I subscribed to for a while, because I wanted to get all his back catalog videos. Plus, he had all these extended things. But one of the things that Coach Red Pill revealed, and a lot of these, what Scott Adams calls the internet dads revealed, is that there's a lot of young men out there who are disaffected, who haven't had role models in their life to look up to. Their fathers have been absent. And so who are you going to go to teach you, what is it like to be a man? And that's where Coach Red Pill's videos would step in for some. Now, I'm not saying for always good effect. I look at some of the stuff out there and I'm like, oh my God. But for, considering that he was making these videos for his own kid, because he described himself the reason for his channel. And the reason for his channel was that he had a son in his late 40s? In his late 40s or late 50s? I want to say late 40s. I could be wrong on that. But anyway, later in life than he expected. He didn't really think about having a kid before. And all of a sudden he got minded that, really, if I'm wanting to leave a legacy to the next generation, it's going to be through my children. So he wound up marrying a woman in Ukraine, and he had a couple of kids with her. And he realized that he was not going to be a virile older man by the time his son needed his advice. I think he was thinking, by the time I'm 30, by the time my son is 30, I'm going to be 70. And who knows what condition of 70 I'm going to be in. I could be, drooling into a napkin by that point. I could be an invalid by that point. Who is going to give my son the advice that he needs when he is at this stage of his manhood? And so he started making these videos on his YouTube channel, going under the name Coach Red Pill. And it was basically directed at his son, basically saying, when you're growing up, if I'm not around, if I'm for some reason, mentally unfit, I can't really be a dad to you like I need to be, then here are all these videos. And there was actually a Michael Keaton movie that went along the same lines. I want to say Michael Keaton and Nicole Kidman maybe were in that movie. And it was about a guy who finds out his wife is having a baby and also finds out he has terminal cancer. And now he realizes he's never even going to see his kid born. Or maybe that's the last thing he gets to do. And so he goes and he creates videos for his child reading books, reading storybooks and stuff like that, things that are age appropriate as the years go by, so that he can have this part in his child's life as his child is growing up, even though he's going to be dead by then. So I don't remember the name of the movie. Maybe y'all do. But that was one where that basically echoes the sentiment for which Coach Red Pill put out his channel in the first place. And so he started just putting out, basic videos on life skills, how to do this, how to do that. And then he started getting into more of the relationship-oriented videos. And that's where he came up with videos like, never date a woman over 30. never date a single mom, and never date a girl with tattoos. And he would have all of these different videos, the more controversial, the better. And those things just took off. And suddenly he became somebody who was falling into the inbox of all of these guys who really didn't have anybody growing up to look up to. My dad was unfortunately forced, well, I say forced, but I don't know really the circumstances of it all, but he basically worked 7 days a week for most of his life. And I think it was during the weekends that, it was the only time that he and I had any time to spend together. He would work in the evenings. I would be at school in the mornings. And so for the work days, for the most part, he and I never really saw each other. And even in the times when I was off school, like during the summer, my dad was asleep for most of the day during the weekdays. And I would just basically be having to be quiet during the day. And so my dad and I never got into a lot of contact. And I didn't learn very much from my father at all. And so there has been, for me, this kind of void where, I think it was in Stan Lee's Who Wants to Be a Superhero, one of the contestants, Livewire, basically said to Stan Lee, "You were my dad during all that time when I didn't have a dad." And comic books for me were a very big father figure for me too. They kind of did the moral instruction that my dad never did. They kind of did the here are the values that you should have as a human being that my parents never really took the time to communicate to me. And I think that's probably one of the reasons why we, as old-time comic book readers, are so disappointed in what we see in comic books today, is because we see them teaching kids values that we would not have taught them, that we were not taught ourselves, that we would not want to have our children taught. And so when people wonder, well, what's the big deal when you have, Tim Drake going by, or, that character being revealed as gay and all this kind of stuff, it's like, well, we don't want this as role models for our kids. That's basically not what we want to send our kids to go to. Or if the comics are basically going to say that, in order to be a good human being, you have to support abortion or something like that. That's not values I want imprinted on my kids. So those are the kinds of things where people who have been left rudderless, people who have been left fatherless, essentially, have gone to one thing or another. Some of us, we went to comics. And in today, there's a lot of internet dads who serve that role. People like Jordan Peterson, people like Stefan Molyneux, people like Scott Adams, people like Coach Red Pill. And he was one of the ones who was out there being a dad to his son online. And so in a way, he was kind of like the surrogate father to us, those of us who chose to subscribe to him. Let me catch up with the chat here. M. Corton found Gonzo via the Duran. Didn't know of him during the red pill phase. Yeah, actually, I found out about the Duran from him. He had the Duran on as a guest, either that or he was a guest on the Duran, and that's how I found out about them. And I watch them now. So the Duran is one of the channels that I watch. And I found there were some other channels that he promoted on his, but I don't really watch any of the other ones. Garfield's Bizarre Adventure. I shouted you out on a Drink with Crazy YouTube channel. I told him I would love to see a debate about the Ripperverse between him and you. You both have different perspectives, and it would be cool. Yeah, that'd be fine. I mean, I've actually never heard about that channel until now. So, yeah, I mean, that'd be fine. Okay, is that, I spit a little on the on the glass there. Okay, so where was I talking about? So yeah, there were a lot of young men out there who, because of all of the rampant fatherlessness in America and probably in other countries, would tune in to Coach Red Pill to find out about things from him that you would not learn from anybody who was in your actual sphere. And one of the videos that I think was really brilliant of his was one, I think that was probably one of the ones that he promoted or mentioned the most. It was one called "The Days Are Long, but the Decades Are Short." And it talks about how, you live your life day after day, and day after day passes by, and then you realize the year has gone by. And then you realize 10 years have gone by. And then you realize, okay, now you're 40, now you're 50. And somehow you just ended up there. But you do have it within your potential, especially now, especially with all the tools at your disposal, to look at how other people have lived and then plan your life accordingly. And so what he did was he created this spreadsheet, and the spreadsheet had all of these different columns on it for different aspects of your life. Relationships, friendships, children, career, wealth, where you live, kind of things like that. And it would just basically be mapping out decade by decade how you saw your life turning out by then, so that it gave you things to work toward. Like 40 years old, you want to have this many rental properties. And then 30 years old, you want to have had a couple of serious relationships. When do you want to have kids? I think here was the one part where I had a problem with him. He was talking about having a couple of kids, like really later in life. When you're 40 or something, have a couple of toddlers. And I'll get back to that in a minute. But he had this spreadsheet and this idea that you could actually plan for the life you wanted and then go after it. How many people are even told that in high school? How many kids are just basically left adrift? I saw this hilarious video the other day. It was on Twitter, and it was about this guy who was saying, all the years that we were in high school, they had the special ed kids in one class, and then they had the rest of us in the other class. And then when we left high school, they all mixed us together, and now we don't know who's who. So anytime I go out there and there's some crazy person out there, I think, maybe that's one of the special ed kids, and I just don't know it now. We used to know it, but now we don't know it anymore. So cut them a break. If somebody's like really weird in your circle, just say that might be one of the special ed kids. I need to go easy on that person. But it reminds me of just the fact that we're put through this education system. And then we're released into the world, and we don't know what the hell we're doing. The only way that we could possibly know what the hell we're doing is if we knew successful people and started following them and started emulating them. Kind of like the way Rich Dad, Poor Dad. If you ever heard of that book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad is about a guy who basically had his own father who was a instructor. And he was a teacher. He basically went the salary route. Never really saved. I mean, he had his savings, he had his Social Security, but he never built wealth. And then he had a friend who he called his rich dad. And it was actually his friend's father. But from his friend's father, who understood how money worked and how you could use money to your advantage, he learned all the ways to be able to build wealth so that in his later life, he built wealth for himself. He didn't listen to his poor dad, his real dad. He listened to the rich dad, his friend's dad. If you don't have these mentors, where do you go? And our schools are not really primed to give you a life plan. Our schools are not really primed. The teachers are all overworked. The counselors are all overworked. God knows how many mental health problems all the kids are bringing to the counselors these days. And so they're not really being told, here is your life in front of you. How are you going to live it? And what should your expectations be decade by decade by decade? And so when Coach Red Pill came out with that video saying, the days are long and the decades are short, it was kind of a profound thing to say, here is a way or a potential map for your life. You can look at your career and say, okay, during this phase of my career, I want to have achieved this. During this phase of my career, I want to have achieved that. During this phase of my wealth building, I want to be at this point. I want to have this many rental properties giving me income. I want to have this much in the bank so that my kids can go to college, and a good college. It was so interesting to see someone take a holistic view towards the life of a young man and say, here, plot it out and then chase it. Now, there was one point at which I did disagree with him, and it was on account of his own life experience. He had this section in there where he said, around age 40 or something, you should have, 1 or 2 toddlers, which was pretty akin to his life. But I took issue with that. And the reason I took issue with that is because he was making those videos because he thought, well, 30 years from now, when my son needs me, my toddling son now needs me, I'm going to be a 70-year-old, and who knows, I may be doddering and drooling, and I may be in a wheelchair or in a nursing home, and who knows. And I said, well, aren't you basically lining up other men for the same trap that you've fallen into? I mean, it's not like he planned this aspect of his life. He just realized when he was approaching his 40th year that he had no kids. His life was a little bit on the meaningless side. Why not get married? Why not have kids? And then there will be this meaning in my life. And so he did that. And there's nothing wrong with coming to that realization late. But why would you then transmit that lateness to the people whom you are advising and say, yeah, put it off like I did, so that you too will have to make videos like I'm making now for your young children? That's the part that I didn't get. And so when I was a Patreon subscriber of his, I actually emailed him about that and said, don't you think you should be, telling people to have their kids about 10 years younger? Because you built your channel on the basis of your being so old now when you finally had kids that you're going to be 70 years old when these kids are needing you. And he took that as a personal attack. And that's when I learned something about Coach Red Pill. Because one of the things about Coach Red Pill that he would always say is that the difference between men and women is that men are rational creatures and women are emotional creatures. And what sets men apart from women in the animal kingdom, and yes, he did group them in that way, is to say that men can detach and view things objectively. Men can be objective, men can be rational. But when I had this interaction with him, I realized that he was not on point as far as rationality was going, because he was not able to see in my argument that I was not attacking him. He treated my responses to him as though I were berating him for his life choices. I said, no, that's not the case. And he and I actually had a little bit of a back and forth, and he never let go of the fact that somehow I was attacking his life choices. And I was like, that's not, behind the scenes, you're not the rational actor that you claim to be. And that was when a little bit of the mask kind of came off. Eventually, I unsubscribed from his Patreon because I'd consumed all the videos that I'd wanted to, and I really wasn't interested in the 2-hour live streams, but that he would do on a weekly basis. He used to have a Sunday live stream where people could do call-ins and stuff like that. And then I watched him. His channel got demonetized. I don't know why. I mean, it was probably an accumulation of all the stuff that he had said. over the years, and he started shifting over from. He created another channel for himself. Instead of Coach Red Pill, he now had a Gonzalo Lira channel. And he started shifting himself from doing the Manosphere type stuff to doing more politically oriented type stuff, where he was commenting more on current events. And also just kind of, showing us some of his day-to-day stuff. He was talking about, I remember videos of him when he was going skydiving. And he actually broke his ankle going skydiving, and so we saw him in the hospital as he was filming to us about his skydiving accident. Because it turns out his eyesight was never all that great, because one of his eyes is a little bit like detached. He's got like a lazy eye, and I'm still talking about him in the current in the present. But he would talk, or his eye would like not be able to focus, and so his depth perception was not what it should be. And so when he was skydiving, he was supposed to be able to look at the ground and know when the ground was coming up, and apparently he didn't. And because of his eyes not being able to focus properly, he landed wrong on his ankle and broke his ankle. So that was pretty bad. Let's see. Coach Garfield's Bizarre Adventure says, Coach Red Pill looks like he could be your brother, Mike. You look similar to the guy. You are not wrong about that. But no relation. So Coach Red Pill, started to reinvent himself in the sense of doing more personal videos, and then it became more political videos, especially as the war in Ukraine got underway. And that's when things kind of took a turn for the worse, because he was starting to present himself as somebody who was in the know as far as Ukrainian politics goes, talking a lot about an oligarch who was out there, and then talking a lot about how Zelensky was more of a puppet figure, et cetera, et cetera. And so all of that got him in trouble with the Ukrainian government. And I feel like, when you're in a country overseas where they don't have the First Amendment, you need to watch yourself out there. I mean, I hate the thought of, having to censor yourself, as many people, have to censor themselves online here in the United States. But even so, to censor yourself in terms of the political environment in which you're in which you have an affection for the country, but at the same time, you're still a guest in the country. I don't believe he was ever a Ukrainian citizen. And so for him to have been making the videos he was doing at the time and expecting that nothing was going to happen to him, I mean, that to me smacked of the kind of hubris that he was known for displaying. And so eventually he was arrested once. He was detained by the Ukrainian police at one point. And you would think at that point, it's like, okay, dude, you've already been arrested by the police. You've already been taken in because they think you're some sort of Russian spy. At this point, don't you think it's time you just kind of either, number one, left the country, or number two, go back to just publishing your regular content that you used to publish? But instead, he just kind of like cranked it up to 11, where he was doing more political roundtables with various people. And he actually had another YouTube channel called The Roundtable with Gonzalo Lira. And he would be hosting all of these people and talking about Ukraine and talking about the war. And I'm just like, dude, you're setting yourself up. I mean, you're acting as if you're invulnerable. And he was like in the middle of writing a book about all of these things. I'm like, you're not going to live to write your book, dude. And I guess maybe I too. I mean, maybe I too was thinking to this like, nah, he's famous enough that this is not going to stick to him. But in the end, I mean, he was wrong, and he wound up in a Ukrainian prison. They let him go briefly on his own recognizance, and at that point, he tried to go to Hungary and seek political asylum there. Instead, they returned him to Ukraine, and they threw him in prison. And he, somewhere along the way, he acquired double pneumonia, and now he's dead. And it's like, well, I went back to my YouTube list of channels that I subscribe to, and I was like, okay, Coach Red Pill, Gonzalo Lira again, and Roundtable with Gonzalo Lira. I guess I'm not going to be, needing those anymore because the guy's dead. I saw his videos that he put out. I kept following his. Yeah, I actually got to make sure I'm not. Well, I kept track of his Twitter feed as well, and now I don't need to do that anymore. And I saw videos that he had put out of when he was going to Hungary, and when he was going to Hungary, and he was basically making a plea to everybody out here, everybody who was his viewership, and saying, if you don't hear from me, then I'm back in Ukraine and I'm back in prison and I'm probably going to die in prison. So please do what you can, for me, didn't really give like specific instructions, but, kind of like raise a fuss with your government officials, State Department, what have you. And I think some people did. I think Elon Musk did. I think there were other internet celebrities or other kinds of celebrities who did try to appeal on his behalf. But I didn't, though. And I think that kind of bothers me now because, of course, look how he ended up. And do I really think that, a phone call from me was going to accomplish anything? Probably not. I mean, I'm nobody in the government. I don't know people up there. At best, I know somebody who used to work in Congress, not in Congress, but for a congressperson. But that wasn't going to do any good. What was I supposed to do? I was supposed to. I mean, I didn't even see a change.org petition going around saying, hey, release Gonzalo Lira from prison, et cetera, et cetera. I certainly would have signed it if it was out there. And I think part of the reason I didn't do anything, part of the reason I didn't even just pick up the phone and make an angry call to the State Department, aside from just, probably a feeling like a complete doofus for doing so, was just the fact that there was a point of pride in him that I don't think he ever lost. Despite him saying, I humbly ask you and beseech you to call on my behalf, I just felt like there was this part of him that said, this can't happen to me. I'm above all this. And in the end, none of us are. I mean, think how many presidents have been shot. We've had 4 presidents who have been killed. I mean, surely the people who think, I'm the leader of the free world, I'm the most powerful person on the planet, surely I'm above it all. And 4 out of the 46 that we've had so far have died in office from an assassin's bullet. And 1 almost died. President Reagan got shot as well. But that's no excuse, though, for my not having done anything. Because who knows when that same kind of thing is going to come for me. I mean, everybody has that moment, and I'm sure everybody has that moment where you think to yourself, look at me. Look at what I can do. Look at what I can say. Look at who I can be. Look at the things that I can do, and nobody can touch me. And then somebody touches you, and you realize just how vulnerable you are. And that's when the humility, it either better sink in or you're going to get taken down even lower. I think the point at which he was, arrested by the police, that was the point it really should have sank in. You're not invulnerable. You don't have the First Amendment out there. You're an American citizen, but you're not covered. That's why, there are people who think, oh, I love to travel overseas. I just love to go. I'm like, seriously? when who knows what you can be arrested for what you say or what you do over there. At least here, I have a reasonable idea of what the laws are. Overseas, I have no idea. You know, you have people who get thrown in jail for making a joke, with a dog and lifting its paw in the air in a pseudo Hitler salute. And you think, I don't feel very safe over there. Even though that's the UK, even though those are our brothers from another mother as far as the country is concerned. And yet I would not feel comfortable setting foot on British soil, knowing that, depending on what words come out of my mouth, I might find myself thrown in jail. But then to be in Ukraine, to be in a freaking war-torn country, and to be making commentary on the war that is contrary to the established narrative. I mean, there's courage and then there's foolishness, because there were plenty of safe outlets from outside the country to comment on that kind of stuff. There was no real special knowledge that he was going to have from within the country to tell us one way or the other what was going on in a way that was not going to endanger himself. And I just felt like, dude, now you're coming to us saying, please save you when you could have saved yourself. I don't know. This is, again, obviously he got canceled in the worst way imaginable. He died in prison. My worst cancellation so far has been cancellation from Twitter. Hopefully that'll be the worst I ever experience. Let's see. Let me get caught up with the chat here. Orgus Din said, yay! I don't know if he's like cheering Gonzalo Lira's death. I think he might be putting that around the same time that I mentioned that. Garfield's Bizarre Adventure says, any plans on getting unbanned from Twitter, and what did you get banned for? I'm not going to talk about what I got banned on Twitter for because I honestly don't know. The problem is I appealed to Twitter 3 times, asking them, it's like, look, according to your policy, you're supposed to give me the tweet that I got banned for and what aspect of the policy did I violate. And on none of my appeals did they tell me either of those pieces of information. So I really don't know what they banned me for. I mean, the only thing I can tell you is the last thing that I said that got me a temporary suspension. At least I thought it was a temporary suspension. I don't know. Maybe that was the permanent suspension right then and there. But it wasn't anything that I thought was like beyond the pale. But unfortunately, since it's something that might have gotten me kicked off of Twitter, I can't really say it on YouTube. If I ever talk about it, I'll just talk about it on Rumble or BitChute. Let's see. M. Corton says, Gonzo had every opportunity to leave. He ignored very clear warnings from very serious people. He put himself in harm's way and doubled down. Yeah, that is the impression that I got. And another impression that I got, and I don't know if you picked up on this, because apparently you followed him some. I got the impression that maybe he had some health issues already. Because it started to sound like he was writing his book as like his farewell message to the world, and he didn't expect to live very long beyond its publication. Not like he was going to be assassinated for it or anything like that, but it was more like, it sounded to me like he may have had some health issues already that he kind of decided, well, if I get killed, screw it. I don't know, because he was never very forthcoming about that aspect of his life, but it just seemed like on a couple of occasions he sounded like he was on his way out. Garfield's Bizarre Adventure. Technically 45, not 46 different men have been president. Grover Cleveland was elected on 2 different times. Yes, and we hope that happens again, don't we? Let's see. Count Dankula getting arrested for a joke was something I probably can't say on YouTube. It was an obvious joke. And yes, it was absolutely an obvious joke. And unbelievably, the court upheld his conviction. I mean, that's like, what the heck? Somebody wrote something in a foreign language I don't understand. Hi, foreign language person. I don't know what the heck that's supposed to be. So yeah. I don't know. I don't know. So I mean, right now, as far as Gonzalo Lira's legacy to me goes, I mean, I guess that's just my subscription to the Duran on YouTube. For a while, I was subscribing to Brian Berletic, also of the New Atlas, but that guy turned out to be a pro-China shill. I mean, when you can't even call Hamas a terrorist organization and you justify it by saying, well, China doesn't label them a terrorist organization, dude. Quit sucking off Xi Jinping. Oh God, and his friend Angelo's even worse. I mean, they just have this like hard on for China. I'll tell you what, if you want some really interesting information about China, there's a couple of channels I can recommend. One of them is Serpent ZA. It's Serpent ZA if you're in the United States and you say the 26th letter of the alphabet is Z rather than Z. But he's from South Africa. Originally lived in China for 14 years, and now he is in the United States. And so he is now free to write or make videos about all of the things that he's seen while he was there. And also he is able to comment on a weekly basis with his friend Sea Milk or Lao Y86, I think. Who was also in China for 10 years, originally from the United States, now back in the United States. And the two of them together have a weekly show called the China Show. And I think that's on ADV China is the channel for that. And so I follow all three of their channels. There's also another guy who goes by Free China. And he will put out like shorter videos, 15-minute videos and stuff on current goings on in China. Those are the channels I really recommend as far as learning about what it's like to live in a totalitarian state, because that is the kind of stuff that can happen here. And I guess one of the things about Gonzalo Lira's legacy is the fact that by dying in a country where he did not have First Amendment protections to keep him safe from the reach of the government, the way that we have that here in the United States, although you can question how well we're protected by it, but at least we have that protection, and we have this long line of legal casework and precedents behind us that say, here is what you are allowed, you are allowed to say most anything, even in times of war. When you realize that is a very tenuous thread connecting your freedom, keeping you connected to freedom, the First Amendment being a very tenuous thread, you start to realize just how important it is to elect politicians who respect the Constitution and don't just see it as this like living document that can be interpreted any way, shape, or form through whatever the lens of the current zeitgeist is. Because there are going to be people out there who are going to say things like, oh, well, First Amendment, well, that just applies to speech you might have in person with another human being. It doesn't apply to being able to speak on the airwaves. As if what we're doing right now through this live stream isn't actually the press, isn't actually a way of distributing and disseminating thoughts. He was basically killed by the Ukrainian government for speaking his mind, however true it was or not, about the actual state of things in Ukraine. About who was really behind all the things, about who was directing who was the puppeteer behind the scenes, and moreover, where the war was going to go. And I guess the jury's still out on that. I can say that looking back at some of his past predictions on politics, I can't really necessarily give them any credibility, because he used to say that Trump would get frustrated with being president and resign. And of course, that didn't happen. I mean, practically the opposite happened. And now look where he is again. Here comes Trump for round two, and I'm hoping he gets in. I don't know. I mean, I'm sure maybe his Patreon is still up, where people can go back and look at his older material. He took down a lot of his material from YouTube, which I thought was just a damn shame. I mean, he should have at least kept up all of the material that he had previously on YouTube. But if you go back and look at his Coach Red Pill channel, it's practically empty compared to what it was before. You probably have to go and find somebody who's got like an archive of all his videos or something and hope they're published somewhere. It's kind of like when Stefan Molyneux's channel got canceled on YouTube and just like lost everything, with the exception of all that he had copied onto Rumble and BitChute and onto his own site, freedomain.com. You can't even count on those videos being there anymore. Isn't that interesting? I just thought about that because Garfield's Bizarre Adventure says, I hope Vivek gets a high position in the administration if Trump wins. That dude is sharp as intelligent. Yeah, I mean, I was putting out a social media messages saying, please, in this, Iowa caucus that was going on, please vote for Vivek instead of Trump, because Trump's going to win. I mean, that's obvious. But the more credibility you can give to Vivek, the better. So yeah, I'm very sorry to see him drop out. But at the same time, I think he'll probably have a position of prominence. I would love to see him as VP. I mean, the problem is that, as Scott Adams says, is that Vivek is a guy who can definitely steal the spotlight from Trump, and Trump would never be having that. But getting back to Gonzalo Lira's channel, Coach Red Pill, Gonzalo Lira again, the original Coach Red Pill channel, where he had all of those videos. I don't even know. I'm gonna look for a second. Let me see something. I want to see if Coach Red Pill, how many videos are on the Coach Red Pill channel now, or if that channel's even still up. Let's see, Coach Red Pill. There's the Coach Red Pill channel. He had 305,000 subscribers. And if I look at his videos, there's 4 videos. There's 4 videos now. And that's it. He used to have hundreds out there. And just think, the whole reason he made that channel in the first place was to be a permanent archive for his son to learn from. Well, I sure as hell hope he was able to archive all of that stuff and deliver it somewhere else for his son to be able to watch, because now it's not out there for the rest of us. Think about that. I mean, this is a guy who built up an internet presence for years, and then because YouTube had demonetized him, and because he wanted to, I guess, reinvent himself in some way, shape, or form, he just cleared all that stuff out. And now it's gone. And now, people going forward into the future, they're not going to be able to benefit from any of it. That actually, it's sad to talk like this, but it's almost like that bothers me as much as him actually being dead. It's not just him who's dead. His channel is dead. His channel is dead. Oh well. At least I got to enjoy it for a while. I think that's something that. Do you ever feel that way about like books that go out of print? Like I'm remembering books like back in the days when they did White Wolf publishing. White Wolf had those. Vampire the Masquerade and all that kind of stuff. Oh, Garfield's Bizarre Adventure says, do you think there was any foul play involved in his channel being erased or in him dying? I just assumed that the Ukrainian government kind of wanted him dead, because, I mean, it was just ridiculous as far as They could have let him go. They could have let him go into leave into Hungary. Let's see. M. Corton says Gonzo's passwords and accounts were taken from him when he was arrested. Those channels are administered by the Ukrainians now. I think they wiped him from memory or tried to. Maybe so. I think there was a point prior to any of this happening that he actually went back and scrubbed his channel himself. I didn't go back and check because all I ever did was look for new videos. But I just basically... I think he may have taken those down himself. I don't know unless you were watching at the time. Garfield's Bizarre Adventure, both. Yeah, I mean, I just assumed that the Ukrainian government wanted him dead, and just keeping him in prison was the easiest way to do it. The Real Nerdy Review. So they won't give you your channel back. That sucks. Yeah, on Twitter. On Twitter they won't. They deleted it. They deleted it altogether. Yeah, on the third appeal, they just wiped it clean. So that channel doesn't even exist anymore. And they did the same to a couple of my other accounts. And I'm wondering if that might have been part of the reason. Is I actually had, like 3 accounts on Twitter. And of course, if you're suspended on Twitter, they don't want you trying to get around that suspension by going to some other account. But I never used those other accounts. One of them was an account that I had that got locked, and I couldn't figure out a way to unlock it. And so I just basically said, screw that. I'm gonna go, create another channel. I created that channel, and that was the one that I was using at the time. And then there was another channel that I created accidentally when I was trying to. I don't remember exactly what I was trying to do. I think I was trying to create something for work. And somehow Twitter got involved, or I was logged in under the wrong ID, and I just wound up creating a Twitter ID. And for some reason, they nuked that one. I didn't even post anything under that one. So let's see, was it post Musk or pre Musk when you were banned? It was post Musk. It was actually post Musk. So yeah, I was shocked because I thought I was kind of imbrued in a little bit of controversy at the time. I was getting a lot of views. I was getting I think at one point I got 4 million views on some of my posts. And I looked at that. I was like, wow, I'm getting a lot of attention here. And but the conversation was subsiding to the point where I thought, oh, well, everything's going to blow past. And I just wound up getting some notoriety for a little while. And then 2 or 3 days later, I get some message on my phone that's something about your Twitter account. And I go there and I've been suspended again. And I was suspended for a specific thing, but I don't know if that was the thing for which I was permanently suspended. But I still don't want to talk about that specific thing because who knows what YouTube's going to say about it. So anyway, that's basically where things stand now. And I've been off Twitter for oh God, it has to have been a year or two now. And I don't really miss it, with the exception of I would love to be able to get involved in conversations that I see, things like happening with Ethan Van Sciver or Eric July or, some of the other celebrities that are out there. And now I just can't. So I go on Gab, and I know Ethan Van Sciver has an account on Gab now. And so that's where I do my social mediating. And, I basically direct people there now because I figure, well, I love to tell people that if I were president, the first thing that I would do is I would say all government Twitter accounts have to be replicated on Gab. And the reason I would do that is because, you're leaving out, at least some segment of the population who is not going to be using Twitter. I mean, it's not like everybody in the world is going to be using Twitter, and it's not like everybody in the world can use Twitter. But one thing that I would really love to tell Elon Musk is why do you even have permanent bans? Why should you have a ban that lasts longer than a year, on Twitter? It's really? I mean, why is it that you would give a person no hope of ever getting back onto Twitter? How bad does the person, and especially when the thing that I said was by no means anything that was I wasn't calling for somebody's death. I mean, I could imagine if it's here's so-and-so's address and you should all go kill him or something like that. Well, then you definitely don't want that kind of person on Twitter or on a social media thing. But even then, you could say, well, dude, doofus, you're banned for a year now. And if you want your account back, you're going to have to wait a year. And then you better be on your best behavior, because if you pull this crap again, we're going to ban you again. I can't fathom why you would even want to do like more than a year in a ban now, because most of the people who would violate are people who didn't know they were violating in the first place. I mean, certainly when I said what I said, it was like, well, this is innocuous. This is nothing. In fact, I'll tell you one time that I got suspended from Twitter. I got suspended from Twitter because somebody made the joke: if I broke into your house right now and stole the thing that was next to you, what would you get? And I replied, shot. And it's like, how do you not know that's a joke? And I got suspended for 3 days for that. That's just so ridiculous. So, anyway, Garfield's Bizarre Adventure. If Alex Jones and Trump can get on ban, then I'm sure you can too. Well, but I'm not as famous as Alex Jones. I mean, I'm not the one who's going to be bringing in the advertising dollars. Oh, man. Yeah, okay. Well, all right. Well, thanks everyone who's been watching. A lot of people have kind of dropped in and dropped out. I'm gonna break off now because I think Glenn Lowry is about to start a live stream on his relationship with Clarence Thomas. So if you go to Glenn Lowry's channel, that's Loury. I'm gonna go check that out. I'm curious to see what he has to say, because apparently he's been a long-time friend of the Supreme Court Justice, and he's supposed to be doing a live stream about his relationship with him, and so that should be pretty interesting. So anyway, thank you all for having ridden this ride down memory lane with me, and rest in peace, Gonzalo Lira. Can't say anything else other than that. We'll miss him, and we'll miss the content he used to bring, because that's all gone too now. Oh well. All right. Thanks everyone. Bye.